This is a full story. Kitten wishes you all a happy and enjoyable story. My name is Rockey. To surprise my fiancée, I secretly went to customize a wedding dress for her. Little did I expect she would give me a shock in return. She was trying on wedding dresses and suits with my best friend. They stood hand in hand in front of the dressing mirror, and everyone clapped and praised them. I joined in the applause, saying, "Indeed, a match made in heaven. Why don't you two go and get your marriage certificate now?" On the day she was really supposed to marry him, she cried with red eyes and begged me to take her away. "If you say the word, I'll run away from the wedding right now." It was too late. There was no place for her in my heart anymore. When I walked into the Happiness Bridal shop, I felt like I had been struck by lightning. My fiancée, Haley, was wearing a pure white trailing wedding dress. She stood in front of the dressing mirror, her right hand linked with a man dressed in a dark blue suit. They smiled sweetly at each other like a perfect pair. As for this man, even without looking in the mirror, I knew it was Tony, my best friend. We three were university classmates. Haley and I had been in a relationship for 5 years and got engaged naturally. This time, I secretly returned to Yun City from a business trip early, just to customize a wedding dress for her at her favorite shop, Happiness. But I didn't expect that my heart full of joy would crash into this scene. It's a perfect match. The groom is so lucky to have such a beautiful bride. The saleswoman praised obsequiously, and other customers in the store also cast congratulatory looks. Haley and Tony, however, did not explain a thing. Of course, they were trying on wedding dresses together. What was there to explain? What was I still expecting? I walked into the crowd, clapping loudly and praising. Congratulations, my dear fiancé and my most loyal buddy, trying on wedding dresses together. And you didn't even inform me? You two really are a perfect match. Why don't you go get your marriage certificate now? Perhaps the earlier atmosphere had been too sweet. Haley didn't even notice when I walked up beside her. She only looked at me in shock when I spoke. "Why are you suddenly?" Haley tried to say something, but Tony stopped her. Tony signaled with his eyes, reminding Haley of the onlookers around us. They all fell silent, but kept their eyes glued to the three of us. Haley fell silent again. "Fine, if you won't explain when I appear." I felt a deep sense of sadness for the last shred of hope in my heart. My gaze was fixed on Haley's hand linked with Tony's. She belatedly let go. Then, with a slight stumble, Tony held her tightly. I knew Haley was terrible at wearing high heels. Seeing her stumble, I instinctively raised my right hand, almost stepping forward to support her. But Tony's hand not only stopped all my actions, but also made me feel a renewed self-loathing. Was being publicly dumped not enough? Was watching my fiancée try on wedding dresses with my best friend not enough? What else was there to push for? I looked at Tony's hand resting on Haley's waist and said coldly, "Tony, you saved me back then, and I've always been grateful for your care. I just didn't know you cared for my fiancée too." Tony didn't explain, only looked at Haley with a blank expression. "You know this person?" Haley glanced at me and then at the other people in the store. "I don't know him, just heard he's from the same school and supposedly has a crush on me." The crowd suddenly understood. They looked at me with expressions of pity. "Very well, Haley. Well done. 5 years of my sincere devotion have turned into nothing but a joke." Even though my heart felt twisted, like a crumpled piece of paper, I didn't want to reveal my vulnerability. It wasn't about being embarrassed. It was that these two didn't deserve it. I forced a smile. I clearly saw Haley's pupils quiver slightly because of my smile. I clapped nonchalantly and said, "You two must lock it down." That night, back home, my mind was a chaotic mess that couldn't settle. I decided to start working in the study. But even by 11 p.m., when Haley came home, my work hadn't progressed at all. Haley walked into the study and saw me sitting at the computer, speaking sarcastically. "Since you love your work so much, why don't you marry it?" I really didn't know how a woman trying on wedding dresses could say such things. "There's some late-night snack in the dining room for you." Haley looked down at me. I understood her subtext. "Look how good I am to you." I went to the dining room and opened the packaging. It was barbecue, Tony's favorite barbecue. Haley stood beside me. Although the barbecue smell on her was faint, it felt exceptionally pungent to me. "These are your favorite lamb skewers. I brought you a lot." Haley's expression was clearly one of self-satisfaction. I smiled faintly and pointed to the squid in the foil. "I'm allergic to seafood." Haley's expression stiffened for a moment, then turned to dissatisfaction. "I brought you late-night snacks with good intentions, and now I get complaints instead. I should have just eaten with Tony and come home empty-handed. She still had the nerve to mention Tony. Don't you have anything you want to say about today's events? I wasn't sure what I was expecting, but this question blurted out before I could think. Haley knew exactly what I was asking, but remained indifferent. What should I say? You want me to explain publicly today? They're just strangers. Misunderstandings will be misunderstandings. We won't see them again. Besides, if I explained after you showed up, wouldn't it make things worse? Do you want them to think I'm some kind of loose woman? Do you ever care about my feelings? Your feelings? Before I could retort, Haley continued, your good buddy is more considerate than you. So that's it. Even though my heart was aching to the point where breathing felt difficult, I managed to maintain my composure and gave a light smile. Since Tony is so considerate, why don't you marry him? Why marry me? Hearing this, Haley swung her hand to hit me. Usually, I thought men should be more tolerant during arguments and always let her hit me. This time, however, I stopped her hand. She was momentarily stunned, her anger growing. Rockey, do you still have a conscience? Not to mention our 5-year relationship. If Tony hadn't saved you back in sophomore year, you would have been kidnapped. How can you tarnish us like this? Oh, us, huh? I just want to ask, how long have you and Tony been in us behind my back? Haley was enraged and flustered. Ever since you got promoted to a higher position, you've been so busy. I only scheduled the wedding dress, fitting myself to be considerate of you. Who knew you were on a business trip, and Tony offered to help. Looking at Haley's tear-filled eyes and hearing her explanations, it was false to say I wasn't heartbroken. But I also knew that her appearance was fake as well. I said coldly, Tony is 175 centimeters tall. I'm 185 centimeters. He's slender and weak. I've been working out. I don't know what he could help me try on. Moreover, he actually saw you in a wedding dress before I did. That's what I cared about the most, but I didn't continue with that last part. It was pointless now. Haley couldn't hit me or win the argument. Bang! She retreated to the master bedroom and locked the door. Whenever we argued, no matter who was right or wrong, she would lock me out until I apologized to her satisfaction before letting me back in the master bedroom. But this time, she would wait in vain for that apology. I walked straight to the guest room. Just as I lay down on the bed, I received a message from Tony. Actually, I was the one who liked Haley first, but because I felt I wasn't worthy of her, I delayed confessing. When I found out you liked her, I gave her up to you, Dot. Although the 3 of us were classmates, our backgrounds were somewhat different. From a worldly perspective, Haley and I were a good match, while Tony came from a less affluent background. I understood Tony's feelings of inadequacy, but what did he mean by giving Haley to me? Haley wasn't his possession. Then Tony sent another message. Given that I saved your life, can you return Haley to me? In my freshman year, I was surrounded by a few thugs. They had ropes, tape, and sacks as if they were going to kidnap me. But once they started, I realized their real intention was to beat me up, not to kidnap me. I thought it was some envious people from campus who had hired these thugs to deal with me. The kidnapping was just to scare me. However, during the beating, it was indeed Tony who saved me. Since then, we became good friends. He became my savior. Whether or not I was actually going to be kidnapped, Tony saved me, and I was grateful, so I didn't care much about the details of the title. But now Tony was using this as an excuse. I called him directly. If you like Haley, why didn't you act earlier? Now talking about being a savior doesn't justify your actions. What you're doing now is just stealing someone else's partner. And don't act like Haley was always meant to be yours. Tony wasn't angry at my rebuke. Instead, he spoke slowly. Rockey, if that's the case, how about we compete fairly? It was originally me who gave Haley to you. She doesn't have no feelings for me. It's you who refuse to believe it now. I thought about the scene of the 2 of them in front of the mirror earlier, and my heart twisted again. Seeing me at a loss for words, Tony's tone became more smug. Tomorrow is the class reunion. Whether Haley still has feelings for me will become clear immediately. The next morning, Haley treated me like air from her grooming to makeup. Previously, I never wanted to let arguments linger, fearing it would create rifts in our relationship. So, every time I was locked out of the bedroom, I would softly plead for reconciliation. But this time, I was firm. I wasn't going to be a simp anymore. I treated her as if she didn't exist and prepared for the noon class reunion on my own. Just before leaving, Haley clomped over to me in her high heels. Rockey, if you apologize to me now, I'll go to the class reunion with you. Otherwise, I'll go with Tony. Haley's offer indicated she must have contacted Tony. She was always preparing an escape route. I replied coldly, you've already tried on wedding dresses with Tony. What's stopping you from going to a class reunion? And I stared at Haley's high heels. I've told you many times, no high heels on the wooden floors at home. This house was bought with the money I earned from working at my father's company and my investments after graduation. All the decorations and furnishings were carefully selected by me. It was meant to be our first home together, a promise I made to Haley. But in the end, I was the only one who cared about this home. Just like our relationship, Haley stomped her heel hard on the floor, picked up her bag, and left. I looked at the mark left on the floor, feeling like it was a reflection of my shattered heart. At noon, when I arrived at the restaurant, Peter clapped me on the shoulder. "Where's Haley? Why didn't she come along? By the way, when is your wedding date?" Other classmates also expressed concern. I forced a smile and said softly, "Haley and I broke up." Everyone was stunned for a moment, and Peter was the first to recover. "Rockey, you started making such hellish jokes? Everyone here knows how you've cherished Haley. You wouldn't break up with her. It's a joke." Yes, something visible to everyone, yet Haley couldn't see it. Before I could say more, Haley and Tony entered the private room. Haley must have heard what I said and looked as if she had swallowed a fly. Tony put his arm around Haley's waist and greeted everyone warmly. "Hey everyone, long time no see." The room fell into an eerie silence, with everyone frozen and no one responding. I looked at the hand around Haley's waist, then at Haley. She didn't flinch, just like yesterday. But this time, my heart didn't hurt as much as it did yesterday. I even broke the silence myself. "You guys were asking about the wedding date? The people involved are here, so ask them." Peter, used to speaking without thinking, blurted out, "Are you and Haley really done? Since when?" "Tony is your best buddy. What's going on?" I smiled slightly. "From yesterday. I only found out yesterday when I saw them trying on wedding dresses." As soon as I finished speaking, the room fell into dead silence. As adults, everyone understood the implications of my words. Haley, who had been held by Tony, now felt embarrassed after being publicly humiliated. She quickly walked over to me. "Rockey, are you done with this?" I feigned innocence. "Isn't what I said the truth?" Haley's face reddened with anger. She took a moment to calm down before linking her arm with Tony's again. "You're right. Tony and I need to discuss the wedding date." When Haley said this, she stared directly at me, not noticing the smug look in Tony's eyes. "So, this was the proof Tony mentioned last night?" Before I could think further, Tony lifted his other hand and embraced Haley. He kissed her on the lips. Gently, he said, "We need to decide quickly. I can't wait to marry you." Haley's choice was the same as the previous 2 times. Though her expression showed a momentary hesitation, she ultimately didn't push Tony away or offer further explanation. So, this was the clarification Tony mentioned. After 2 days of heartache, seeing Haley and Tony kiss publicly left me somewhat numb. But I knew there was no possibility left between Haley and me. After the meal began, I chatted and laughed with my classmates, but no one took the initiative to speak to Tony and Haley. On one hand, I had always been popular in college, and on the other, everyone had seen through the drama from earlier and understood who was right and who was wrong. Peter deliberately raised his voice and asked, "Rockey, what kind of girl do you like? Tell me, and I'll introduce you." I gave a faint smile, but before I could say anything, Peter added, "No matter what kind of girl, at least she should be loyal in relationships." Haley knew that Peter was speaking to provoke her, but she didn't dare to lash out, or she'd be openly admitting her disloyalty. Peter turned to look at Serena, who was sitting on my other side, with a look of sudden inspiration. "Serena seems nice. If I remember correctly, she's still single, right?" Serena, a very shy girl, had barely interacted with me during our 4 years of college. Being publicly named by Peter for such a matchmaking topic, her face instantly turned bright red. All right, I'm not planning to look for a partner right now. Don't just joke around with people." I knew Peter meant no harm and didn't take it too seriously. I was surprised when Haley immediately took the conversation in a new direction. "Peter, you're a really unqualified matchmaker. Basic requirements for introducing someone include social standing. Don't you know that?" Haley's comment made Serena's head bow even lower. Seeing Haley's confident expression, I suddenly felt disoriented, as if I didn't know her at all. When did she become so petty? But at the same time, I felt a twinge of relief. "It's good that we broke up." I glanced at Tony, who looked wary beside Haley, and said calmly, "Seeing Miss Haley's choice in partners, I didn't realize you were so concerned about social status." Serena and Tony were from the same region, but their backgrounds were different. In an instant, Tony's expression went from wary to distorted. So my seemingly polite good buddy had this side to him too. As Tony's eyes turned red with anger, Haley, on the other hand, started to laugh, covering her mouth. "Rockey, weren't you just saying you broke up with me? Why are you getting jealous now?" My decision to break up with Haley was firm. I was too lazy to explain her baseless confidence. "You can comfort yourself however you like, but remember, I really have broken up with you." I turned to Serena. "Could you come outside with me for a moment? I have something to discuss with you." As Serena and I walked to the parking lot, Haley came running out in her high heels. "Rockey, you jerk! I brought Tony here just to annoy you. And now you're walking out with another woman in front front of everyone. When Haley mentioned Tony again, I realized I no longer felt heartbroken. Instead, I was more annoyed by her absurd comments. "We've broken up. Who I walk with has nothing to do with you." Haley stared intently into my eyes, as if seeing the coldness in them. At that moment, I saw a flash of panic in her gaze. "Rockey, let's not stay in a cold war, okay? Do you know I didn't sleep all night waiting for you to come find me? You ignored me this morning. Do you know how much that hurt?" I was genuinely amused. "Waiting for me? Were you waiting for me as a person or waiting for my apology? You and Tony were secretly trying on wedding dresses behind my back and expect me to apologize? And did you consider whether I was hurt when you treated me like air this morning? Love is mutual. You can't always expect the other person to give." Haley's expression froze for a moment. She glanced at Serena and then softened her voice to start explaining. "Okay, I admit I didn't do well before. I'll change in the future. I know you brought Serena just to make me angry. I can explain that kiss in the room was just an accident. Before Haley could say more, I interrupted her. "Isn't it possible that if you and Tony went to bed one day, you'd also say it was an accident?" I looked at Tony, who had just walked out, and chuckled. "So, this is your idea of seeing the truth? Just a fleeting kiss. It seems a bit childish, don't you think?" Tony, who was hoping to see me in pain from the breakup, ended up becoming the target of ridicule along with Haley. His face turned a deep shade of red. He stiffly held Haley's hand. "Haley, I've actually liked you for a long time. I just knew that coming from a small place, I wasn't worthy of you. So I never expressed my feelings until Rockey confessed. But if Rockey truly cared about you, would he let you try on wedding dresses alone? Would he let you come to a class reunion without even a partner? Would he remain indifferent when he saw me kiss you?" After this speech, Tony's expression shifted from stiff to that of a melodramatic hero. Haley stood there stunned. I started clapping loudly. What a touching confession. "Haley, you must agree. You two should stay together and stop tormenting others." With that, I drove away with Serena. As soon as Serena and I arrived at the coffee shop, she directly told me, "I have someone I like." So she'd been holding this in all the way here just to say that? I quickly explained, "Sorry, I didn't mean anything by it. I just thought you and Tony are from the same region, and I wanted to ask you something. Tony saved me in my freshman year, and since then, we've been very close. Although Tony is quite self-conscious, feeling he lacks background and capability, he has always tried his best within his means to be good to me. So, seeing him and Haley trying on wedding dresses left me more confused than hurt when I calmed down. How could someone who once saved me at great personal risk now be trying to steal my girlfriend? Moreover, Tony's recent behavior seemed completely different from the person I knew. I don't know how Tony and Haley ended up together. At today's gathering, Serena naturally thought I was probing into their affair. I chuckled and said, "I'm not asking about that. Honestly, I don't even know what I'm trying to ask. I just feel like I barely recognize Tony anymore. I've known Haley for 5 years, so I understand her well. This whole Tony issue was more like an opportunity for the imbalances in our past relationship to fully erupt. Therefore, my decision to break up with Haley is very firm. I wouldn't inquire about how Tony and Haley ended up together because, regardless of the process, I would have ended things with Haley. It's just that Tony's transformation is a bit puzzling. Seeing Serena hesitating, I knew I had asked the right person. After some hesitation, she finally spoke slowly. "There's something I know from university that I wanted to tell you if I had the chance. The person who kidnapped you was hired by Tony." I was stunned, listening as Serena continued. She had stumbled upon this by accident and initially wanted to tell me in person, but because Tony and I became good friends and were almost inseparable as dorm mates, she never had the opportunity. Later, seeing Tony behave well and not doing anything harmful to me, she chose not to bring it up again. Although Serena didn't understand Tony's motives, I understood perfectly. Reflecting on our 4 years in college, Tony always seemed envious when encountering situations involving connections or resources. I bet these kinds of gatherings are really interesting. I've never been to one. People like me, without background or connections, can only envy. Tony, my so-called good buddy, said things like this. How can I not bring him along? So, Tony orchestrated the kidnapping and personally rescued me, all just to get a chance to be close to me. Compared to ordinary college classmates, having the title of a savior made it more likely he could tap into my resources. But this matter is easily resolved. With my capabilities, cutting off his connections, or even destroying his job would be a simple task. At that moment, I began to understand why Tony set his sights on Haley. When I returned home that evening, Haley was waiting for me in the living room. I realized, somewhat belatedly, that this was probably the first time Haley had waited for me. "Haley, since we've already broken up, you should pack your things and leave soon." This time, Haley didn't lash out or continue to ignore me. Instead, with reddened eyes, she clung to my arm and cried. "Rocky, we haven't communicated properly these past few days. Please listen to me, okay? Nothing happened when we tried on the wedding dresses. It was simply because you were away on a business trip and Tony suggested trying on the suits. I know you and Tony have different body types, so I initially refused. But Tony is, as you know, very enthusiastic. I felt bad refusing him multiple times, so I eventually agreed. And I thought, even if the body types are different, trying on wedding dresses and suits together couldn't hurt. Even though I was heartbroken seeing them in the wedding dress store, I believed that if Haley had explained to me patiently like she was now, given my tolerance for her, we might have reconciled. At this point, I actually appreciated her selfishness. Her unwillingness to explain proactively was what led me to end this unbalanced relationship. "Haley, it's too late. An explanation now is worthless." Haley seemed panicked and continued to explain urgently. "I intended to explain that day. I waited for your call at the barbecue stall, but you never contacted me. The longer I waited, the angrier I became, so I stayed out until late on purpose. And that night, I waited for you the whole night in the room. Do you know how much it hurt me? At the class reunion, if you had said something, I definitely wouldn't have gone with Tony. I even asked you, but you still wanted to stay in a Cold War. Rocky, I love you. You know that. We're just both angry right now. Don't let a petty argument end our relationship." I laughed coldly. "Haley, do you see the point? I'm breaking up not because of a petty argument, but because you always place your own pride and status above me." Seeing that I was resolute and she couldn't change my mind, Haley tried to use parental pressure. "Our parents may not be wealthy, but they're influential. We're engaged, and if we don't marry, everyone will lose face." Face. Haley always cared about face. "My parents only want me to be happy. It's better to stop this now than to marry someone who could cheat at any moment." Haley quickly shook her head. "That won't happen. I've already rejected Tony's confession. We won't have any further contact. Don't worry. Haley, there's no need. We've broken up. There's nothing to worry about." Haley seemed to be infuriated by my repeated firmness. Finally, she let go of my hand. "Fine, Rocky. Good for you. If you keep being stubborn, be careful I really marry Tony." I sighed slightly. "I'm not being stubborn. I've just truly fallen out of love. Who you marry is none of my concern. Just to add, I only learned today that the person who kidnapped me back then was Tony. So think about Tony's intentions in getting close to you." I didn't expect Haley to scoff at my warning. "After today's class reunion, Tony reminded me that you would definitely smear him after his confession in front of you. I didn't believe it at first, but it turns out you really are that petty." With that, Haley packed up and left. The next day, our class group received an electronic wedding invitation from Haley and Tony. The wedding was scheduled for the weekend. We're all adults now. I've already made my warnings, and since she's determined to marry, I couldn't say much more. I still plan to attend the wedding. After all, I'm no longer the heartbroken ex. I'm just attending a classmate's wedding. However, when I arrived at the wedding hall, I received a WeChat message from Haley. "Come to the dressing room. I have something important to tell you, Dot." When I walked into the dressing room, I saw Haley wearing the wedding dress she tried on at the store. "Do you like it?" I didn't answer. Haley continued on her own. "I remember you liked trailing dresses, so I specifically chose this one. If it were a wedding with you, would you also choose this dress?" Haley spoke with confidence, as if she understood me well. I showed no expression and replied on D. "I was planning to custom make a wedding dress for you at Happiness. I never intended for my wife to wear a cookie-cutter wedding dress." Haley looked at the dress with clenched hands and then raised her eyes, which were now moist. "So, Rocky, how could you let go of such deep feelings so quickly? You must still have feelings for me, right? Do you know, because I insisted on breaking our engagement to marry Tony, my parents have disowned me. If you don't want me back, I'll be truly alone. Rocky, as long as you ask, I'll run away from the wedding for you." Even now, Haley, wanting to keep me, still waited for me to take the initiative to approach her. I smiled faintly. "I've been broken up with you for a long time. Haley, allowing Tony to get close to you was your choice. Deciding to marry Tony is also your choice. Since we're adults, we must learn to bear the consequences of our choices, even if it means being alone." With that, I left the dressing room. After Haley's commotion, I lost interest in attending the wedding. But after finishing up my tasks that evening, I found a message from Serena sent an hour earlier. "Tony ran away from the wedding this afternoon. I don't know what method Haley used, but she found out Tony's location and then stabbed him. I had just read the message and was about to reply when I received a call from the police. Haley had been arrested and was refusing to cooperate with the investigation. She claimed she would confess everything if I showed up. When I saw Haley in the police interrogation room, she was still wearing the wedding dress from earlier in the day. The once pristine white gown was now stained with grime and splattered with blood. Her meticulously styled bridal hair had become a wild mess. As soon as Haley saw me enter the room, her previously dull eyes lit up with a sudden glimmer. "Rockey, I stabbed Tony. Can you now believe that there was really nothing between us?" I wasn't sure when Haley had begun to lose her sanity, but I understood that her madness wasn't about how deeply she loved me. She simply couldn't accept that things had spiraled out of her control. The more she tried to force me back onto the path she envisioned, the more she realized that everything had become distorted beyond recognition. "Haley, Tony was just a catalyst for our breakup. For 5 years, I put you first in everything, thinking that's what a boyfriend should do for his girlfriend. You naturally accepted it. But over those 5 years, whether in arguments or public jokes, your pride always took precedence over my feelings. You could repeatedly hurt me for the sake of your pride. But as the hurt accumulated, I naturally stopped loving you." Haley stared at me, stunned, then self-deprecatingly said, "Am I really so unworthy of love? Tony doesn't love me either. When I found him today, he seemed like a different person. He smugly told me that the kidnapping during college was indeed his doing, the fastest way he could think of to change his fate. But after graduation, as just your friend, the benefits he could gain were limited, so he started targeting me. But when he realized that because of this wedding, my parents had cut ties with me, he decided I was no longer useful and fled. He actually dared to run away from the wedding in public. He has no idea how much of a joke I became at the wedding today. I don't regret stabbing him. Although he didn't die, he's no longer a man." Haley's expression was somewhat twisted. "Rockey, this stab wasn't just for me. It was also for you." Haley always immerses herself in her own perspective. I calmly exposed her self-deception. "Stop glorifying your actions and then trying to feel moved by them. You intended to use Tony to anger me, but at the same time, you gradually lost yourself. Everything you did was for your own pride. No matter how outrageous Tony's actions were, even if he kissed you, you had to maintain your pride. And the one you chose to abandon was always me. You thought I would always be waiting for you, that your choices could preserve your pride while manipulating me. But you didn't expect that when I broke up with you, you became the one who was abandoned." I mockingly asked, "How could your pride allow such a thing to happen? Just like Tony running away from the wedding. Deep down, you thought marrying him was a favor to him, but he fled and you became the one who was abandoned. So, you stabbed him." Just as I had said before, adults must face the consequences of their actions. Haley's arrest is the price she must pay. When I left the police station, I received another message from Serena. Tony woke up, learned about his condition, and jumped to his death. Serena had probably sent me these updates twice today because I had previously asked about Tony. Thanks, no need to pass on any more updates. Whether it's Tony or Haley, they no longer have anything to do with me. Tony's suicide was his own choice. I merely informed my assistant that there was no need for further action against him. I have my own path to walk in life. Although I don't know if it will be smooth, I know that every decision I make must be well considered. As an adult, one must always bear the consequences of their choices. The end. If you enjoyed Haley's story, please like and subscribe to Kitten's channel with updates every morning at 9 a.m.